There was various demonstrations here in Dublin at the in town at the embassy when the embassy actually opened. I remember going back to the massacres in Sabra Shatila in 2000 or 1982, and then the first Intifada in 1987. And I particularly became interested, I think, in what was happening in Palestine because there wasn't that much about the first Intifada in the media here. But I did read an article, I think it was in the New Statesman, about the first Intifada and the breaking the bones policy, where you had squads of Israeli soldiers going out at night, identifying Palestinian demonstrators and breaking arms or legs or both. And it wasn't reported. And I thought, what struck me was the fact that there is so much not reported at the time, you know what I mean? And then your awareness is, kind of heightened. So you're looking for things then about Palestine in other forms of media. So it wasn't until the IPSC was founded in 2001, and I remember meeting them at a stall. There was a stall in Grafton Street, passing one day, and I thought, this is fantastic because I am interested. And so I joined, but I didn't join till, well, I didn't get in till it was 2003. In the meantime, the Iraq War was the build up to the Iraq War was happening. So I joined the Irish anti-war movement, and I remember one of the first demonstrations in 2002. 2003 I joined the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign, but I was very active in the Irish anti-war movement before that, and I mean going in demonstrations to Shannon and that, and I eventually wound up on the steering committee of the Irish anti-war movement. Then I was a member of the IPSC, so I got involved, and I was doing stalls as far back as 2002, and have been active since then. I was treasurer, chairperson. I'm now the national organizer and vice chair. It has been, kind of a growing, and of course, as the more you're involved and the more you learn, and particularly now with social media, the more you're aware of exactly what's happening in Palestine. So you've more awareness and more instant awareness. I mean, if there's a demonstration attacked in, say, in Berlin or on Fridays, then you'll see it here in Friday afternoon. You know what I mean? So see, there is that awareness. There are home demolished or that, so everything is very kind of instant now. So I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a great tool for sharing information. But there's still no really covering or proper covering of the what you could call it. I mean, people call it conflict of what's happening to the Palestinian people in the mainstream media. Like say our national broadcaster RTE or say like papers of record like the Irish Times. So.
If people are interested, like, what would be the best news sources to find out about Palestine, in your opinion?
Well, there's no mainstream media that I can kind of direct people to. Some of the online sites like Electronic Intifada, there's Mondevice, there's the IPSC site as well, and the IPSC Facebook page, because we share a lot of what's coming out of Palestine. So I mean, one of our objectives, say in the IPSC, is to get Palestinian voices heard, because they're not being heard. You hear of Israelis react, and this is the narrative that you get in mainstream media, that there is violence against the Israelis and they react, but you don't see the everyday violence of home demolitions, of land takeovers, of the settlers attacking Palestinians, burning their crops or chopping down their olive trees. You don't hear anything about that. But as soon as Palestinians attack Israelis, then you would hear it in the mainstream media. So it's one of the interesting things. I mean, if you ask people in general, despite the coverage that's been going on in Israel-Palestine for years, and the occupation has gone on 50 years, that people still are not aware of really what the issues are even.
Recently it was a Nakba Day. Could you tell us what this day is, please?
Yeah, Nakba Day is you had, when the State of Israel was formed, or before it was formed, even when the UN partition plan was announced in 1947, you had almost immediately, the start of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. because what happened was that you had a state that was populated by Palestinians, and you had a huge Jewish immigration from Europe, particularly in the 30s and 40s. So it would have been impossible to, and the Zionist aim was to establish a Jewish state, but it couldn't have been established because the population of Palestine was, I mean, there were so many people in Palestine already. I mean, you had the indigenous population were already there. So what had to happen for a Zionist state to be established, the Palestinians had to be driven off their land and off their homes and out of the cities. And that's exactly what happened. It started in 1947, in December 47, went on before Israel's independence date, and by the time Israel declared independence in June, May, 48, 200,000 Palestinians had already been expelled. So then when Israel declared independence, and you had this supposedly war, but meaning the Zionists are much more organised, they started ethnic cleansing. And so the idea was to get as much of the land with as few Palestinians actually on it. So there was that.
Yeah, I think what the excuse from Israel is, was there a war in 1948 or something between the Palestinians and some other countries?
When you look at I mean, there was the story about the 5 Arab armies, but they were very disorganized and not as military capable because the Zionists had been actually training militarily since the established Zionist settlements in Palestine. So the Zionists are much better prepared, and they had worked with the British Army to put down the Palestinian uprising in 1936-39. So I mean, they were actually well prepared militarily. The Arab armies, I mean, there was fighting, but it was reactive in the sense of they were trying to defend Palestinian areas. But there wasn't, they were outnumbered by the amount of armed Zionists at the time. So, but most of the ethnic cleansing happened in villages where there was no fighting. I mean, like, the villages were taken over and they were cleansed, and of course you had this reign of terror where they made examples of a village like, say, Deir Yassin, where they massacred most of the population, men, women, and children. And the few survivors that they captured, they paraded in Jerusalem, and to show what would happen to the rest of the Palestinians. And a lot of Palestinians fled because of terror. And then you have the actual outcome from that. Then with like 750,000 Palestinians were actually driven out of what was historic Palestine into say Lebanon, Syria, neighbouring countries, Egypt. So and also you had another 100 and something thousand displaced within the borders of historic Palestine as well. So it was a massive ethnic cleansing, really massive in terms of the amount of the population, 800,000 of a population of what maybe million 100,000.
A lot of people around the world find what Israel has done to the Palestinians outrageous. There are two sides to every story, though. How heavily are you in the IPSC involved with the politics of Palestine, or are you a campaign that works in solidarity with the ordinary people of Palestine, and you are not specifically supportive of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah. Well, the IPSC are very careful not to take sides in the dispute disputed leadership between the Palestinian Authority, which would be represented as Fatah really, and the Hamas government in Gaza. So I mean, we are very careful not to take sides, and we take our guidance, if you like, from the Palestinian call for a boycott, Palestinian civil society called for a boycott in 2005, and they called for a boycott because, despite the Oslo Accords and all the rest of the actual commitment to a Palestinian state that Israel made, the rest of the world signed up to, but that nothing was happening, and more land, as settlements are being built, more land is being taken. So one of the things, and because of the inaction of our governments, one of the things that the Palestinians called for them was a boycott, like South African boycott. So we have engaged with that, and we've answered a call that Palestinian civil society have made. So this is where we take our direction from, really, and very careful not to support either side. I mean, the organisation that should represent the Palestinian people is the PLO, which should be made up of all representatives of Palestinian people, including refugees. So this is a problem because the PLO needs to be reformed because it doesn't represent the Palestinian people anymore. And the PLO are the negotiating body for the Palestinian people, all Palestinian people, but it does need to be reformed. Even the Palestinian Authority would say that.
How hopeful are you that the Palestinians will get most or all of their land back? And could you tell us, does the IPSC have an opinion on what should happen to Israel and the Israeli people if the Palestinians get their land back?
Well, the whole question of I mean, what we support, and this is very basic stuff. We support, for example, and just to quote our constitution, we are opposed to all forms of racism and anti-Semitism. We support the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We support the rights granted to Palestinian people, to all people under international law. Like the right of return, which is a right under international law, and also reinforced by Resolution 194 of the United Nations General Assembly. So we support basically human rights, and this is what we support. And the question of the Palestinians getting their land back. See, the thing is, the Palestinians are entitled to return home. The Palestinian refugees. 1 in 3 refugees in the world are Palestinian, and have been refugees for a long time now. And you can't say that they have to give up their rights. And why should they?
1 in 3 refugees in the world?
In the world, yeah. Are Palestinian, yeah.
I thought with Syria that wouldn't be right now. There's millions of Syrians.
Well, there's over 5 million Palestinian refugees recognised by UNRWA. Yeah. So I mean, so why should they give up their rights? I mean, why should the Zionists claim to the land? You know what I mean? Trump the Palestinian human rights, and this is a question, and this is what we support, and this is what we base our campaigns on as well. We support human rights, and we support the rights of the Palestinian people, that they are under international law, So this is what you have to discuss if you're talking about Palestinian rights. What the settlement would be, I mean, if there is to be a settlement, it's up to the Palestinian people, As for the idea that there might be a two-state solution, and there was talks in France recently on the 31st of May, the idea that you could still, and the people still talk about it, that there could be a two-state solution. But if you look at what's happening in the Palestinian occupied territories, you'll notice that 60% of the occupied territories, which was 22%, fifth of historic Palestine, is off limits to Palestinians because of settlement roads, because of closed military zones, and so like this is what you're left with. You're left with when you look at the maps, and if you look back at the maps in apartheid South Africa, at the Bantustans, these separate little territories that they were going to call it the South African state for native South Africans. Then this is what you can see in Palestine as well. These states separated by settlements or settlement roads with no territorial connections, and completely separated. And this is why it is so close to when you look at the Bantustans in South Africa. This is happening. I mean, this is happening today. This is the policy, to get as much land as possible with as few Palestinians on it. Now, when you think of the size of historic Palestine, like Israel-Palestine at the moment, including Gaza, it's about the size of Munster. You've got
Israel included.
Israel included, yeah, it's about the size of Munster.
The whole of Israel.
The whole of Israel and Palestine. So you've got 1.2 million people in Munster. You've got 12 million people in historic Palestine. So you can see why Israel has taken land, because they need it. They need it for their own population. And the policy has been so far, this is not just in the occupied territories, this is in Israel as well, is to limit the boundary, to put boundaries on the growth of the indigenous population and to grow their own population, settler population instead, you know what I mean? And you can see that happening. I mean, you can see that happening within Israel. There's been no new Palestinian towns since Israel was formed, but there have been a lot of Palestinian or a lot of Jewish towns, Jewish only. And of course, and then you have the situation said within Israel again, of the of the native population in the Negev, who are being driven off their land, so that Jewish settlements can be built there. So we support, and as an organisation, we support all Palestinian rights of Palestinians within Israel as well.
All right. Could you tell us how you would judge the current? I know we only have a new Irish government now, but the current Irish government and the recent Irish governments in Ireland, both led by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, how would you judge them on the Palestinian question? And what would you say, just talking to expand on what we're talking about there, what would you say about the international community's response in general to what is going on over there?
Well, the international community, and you'll have the European Union, you'll have the Irish government saying, that settlements are terrible and something has to be done, and the European Union make these statements every now and again when Israel announcing settlement expansion, that this is unhelpful and this won't be free. But they've done nothing concrete. They're still arguing about labelling goods from illegal goods from the occupied territories, about labelling them. I mean, instead of saying, no, these should be banned straight away. But they're still arguing about that. So, nothing concrete has been done in support of the Palestinian people. And when I say concrete, I mean what you need now. I mean, to make Israel aware, to make Israel sit up and say, no, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep dispossessing the Palestinians. There are sanctions. You have to have sanctions now. There's no time for anything else. I mean, if you talk about, we have to go into another 20 years of talks, there'll be nothing left to talk about. Because, as I say, Israel is expanding settlements all the time, every day, or taking over houses, say, particularly in East Jerusalem, every day. So there'd be nothing left to talk about, like in, say, 20 years' time. So talking is finished. It's time for action, for governments to take action. But Ireland, I mean, we met with the Chief Secretary, General Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs, with Haneen Zouabi, a Palestinian member of Knesset, a number of years ago, and she was arguing that the Irish government has to do something concrete. But then the argument from the Irish government is that there has to be consensus within the European Union. But I mean, some states within the European Union, particularly Germany, the Czech Republic, for example, as well, will not allow any criticism of Israel. You know what I mean? Apart from saying something like that expanding settlements is unhelpful. But I mean, you need act. We could take, the Irish government could take action unilaterally. We did with South Africa. We did ban South African produce in 1985 after the Dunstores boycott in '84. I mean, and there was such a kind of awareness raised about what was happening to the native South African population, that the minister was able to, and he did, but unilaterally ban South African produce in 1985. So this is something that the Irish government could do. I mean, they could say, look, we're supporting human rights, we're supporting international law. Someone has to do something. You know what I mean? What is happening though? I mean, the growth of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement has been growing all around the world, and you have, for example, our own multinational Cement Roadstone Holdings divested this year from their holding with an Israeli company.
Who are they?
Cement Roadstone Holdings, CRH.
Right.
They divested from their holdings in an Israeli materials company, building materials company, which was involved in building the wall and the settlements. So that is something that has happened. Now there have been divestments from particularly maybe some of the churches in America. The United Methodist Church have divested from any company that's involved in the occupied territories and in the occupation. And the Dutch pension fund is another one. The Norwegian state pension fund has divested as well from Israeli banks who are involved in the occupation. So this is something that is actually happening as we speak. Plus, I mean, I think the boycott movement is growing as well. And no, what we need is, I mean, this isn't going to end what's happening to the Palestinians. This isn't going to stop what's happening to the Palestinians. But hopefully it will lead to governments changing their opinion, and it will lead to sanctions. And that's something that we have to work for. I mean, in 1984, I remember standing outside Dunstores with my plaque. I wouldn't have thought that 7 years later, the South African government would fall. You know what I mean? I mean, it was kind of, because it was a long struggle. The first demonstration I went on was 1970. The Springboks were here in Lansdowne Road. So, you know, it took a long time, but I mean, it's gradually happening. One of the other effects of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement as well, it's raising awareness. You know what's happening to the Palestinians, because to ask people to boycott something, you have to make them aware of exactly what's happening as well.
Yeah. And you have another campaign, don't you, about arms?
Yeah, well, we're asking the government not to. The government over the years have been buying arms from Israel for the army. So they've been buying bullets, and they bought drones, helmets. So we've asked them not to buy. You know what I mean? Particularly, I mean, when you think that, like, say, from, if you have a look at the recent attacks on Gaza, or attacks over the years, and I think in 2014, I think you could see that. I mean, there are, the actual amount of shelling, and the range of military equipment that the Israelis were using on Gaza. I mean, on a defenseless population, really. The shelling from the sea. They had drones firing missiles. They had F-16s. They had artillery. They had mortars, tanks firing into Gaza. That a lot of Israel were testing their equipment, I think, on the Palestinians in Gaza. And we shouldn't buy any arms from Israel because of those. I mean, because of the way they treat the Palestinians, and the fact that they do. I mean, and they say that these weapons are battle tested. They're tested against a kind of a civilian population. You know what I mean? So we should be at the forefront, and that's something the government could do straight away. So look, we are no longer going to buy weapons from the Israeli army or from the Israeli state. So that's one thing they could actually do. Now, plus we also export software that's used for military purposes in Israel as well. So we can stop that as well. There are other international campaigns as well. There's a campaign against HP, Hewlett-Packard, because some of their equipment is being used in checkpoints in the occupied territories. So that's a campaign as well. And of course, there's the campaign against G4S as well, who are involved in the Israeli prison system.
What's G4S?
G4S is a security company.
Oh.
So there is an ongoing campaign against them, even though they've said that they're going to pull out. But they haven't been. There've been contradictory statements about that as well, that they're going to sell their stake in Israeli or in the G4S Israel, but they are involved in the Israeli prison system, in transporting prisoners, in providing cameras, and in for security and for interrogation, stuff like that. You know.
Do you know when was the last time the Irish government or Department of Defence bought arms off the Israeli army?
I can't remember exactly the last time, and sometimes this information isn't always forthcoming. I know they bought drones when they were going to North Africa, maybe around the time that the Irish peacekeepers were going into Mali. I think possibly around then, or Chad, somewhere there anyway. I know they spent a lot of money on drones.
Is all the information about the different campaigns on your website?
Yeah, you can have a look. Our website is www.ipsc.ie, and our Facebook is Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. So you'll get a lot of information on that. And I mean, if you look at the Electronic Intifada is quite good. Mondo Weiss is American website as well. You'll get good information on that as well.
Finally, could you tell us? I don't know if you had more to say. If you want to say more, go ahead. But could you tell us what is your message to the Irish government and others who may be listening today?
Well, my message is fairly simple. I mean, they have to. I mean, it's too late for talks. You know what I mean? It has to be sanctions now, and the Irish government should do something concrete, and they can do it unilaterally. I mean, it's been shown. I mean, who's going to attack the Irish government because they say they ban even Israeli settlement produce? If they say ban that from the country, what are you going to say? No, you have to accept this, even though it's illegal. No. I mean, and even if they ban all Israeli produce. And they'll say that they can do this so we do reach a peaceful solution in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. But I mean, the idea that the Palestinians and the Israelis can sit down again and talk as equal even though the Israelis have guns to the Palestinian heads, if you know what I mean, in terms of the balance of power, you've got maybe the fourth, fifth largest army in the world, uh, and people who are mainly defenceless. You know what I mean? People who are mainly civilians, farmers. I mean, martial farmers in the West Bank. You know what I mean? And there were farmers who were losing their land, and they're facing an army that's relentless. You know what I mean? So I mean, people are arrested. You know, the whole state apparatus is used against the Palestinians. You know, but I mean, there's over 400 Palestinian children in Israeli military detention. You know, I mean, these are disgraceful things that are going on. You know, in a country that's supposed to be, you know what I mean, democratic, and the most moral army in the world, and which obviously is not. You know, Palestinians are executed, or when they're shot, they prevent ambulances from going to treat people. You know, so this is happening all the time. But my message to the Irish government is simply this: is it's time to act now. You know what I mean, and it has to be sanctions. It has to be something concrete. No point in talking anymore. You know, we've seen what talks have led to nothing, nowhere, except to the disappearance of Palestinians in the West Bank. You know.
And just to finish
Yeah.
up, there are even like some Israelis who agree with you, aren't there?
Yeah. Oh, there is. I mean, like, there are Israeli groups who boycott from within. You know, and I mean, you have Israeli human rights organisations which are very prominent as well, and very sincere and honest. And we have B'Tselem who've now stopped cooperating with the Israeli army because any reports that they had, and any reports of army violence or extrajudicial killings that they've asked the army to investigate have resulted in nothing. So they've stopped cooperating. And plus the Israelis have made it legal for people to boycott within Israel. But there are Israelis, I mean, there are brave Israelis who will speak out, even though it's more and more
Even in
dangerous.
the army, isn't there?
But there are people who've refused to serve in the army. But I mean, it's Israel is getting more and more like a fascist state. You know what I mean? And if you read the article that was in the Irish Times Wednesday, a few Wednesdays ago, Yuri Evnery and talking about the comparisons between Israel and Germany in the 1930s. I mean, it's an extraordinary article, but someone who's lived through both and who should know. It's well worth having a look at and seeing where Zionism has actually led the Israeli people, you know, to this kind of a government and that kind of everyday racism, you know what I mean, that you can shout, you can have groups of people who march through Arab areas in Jerusalem, they shout death to the Arabs, and no one makes any passes a remark about it, and it's allowed. I mean, how could you have that? Can you imagine someone marching through a Jewish area, say, shouting death to the Jews, and you know, and no one passes a remark about it. You know, I mean, when you look at it, really, I mean, it's extraordinary what Israel is getting away with, the Israeli state. You know.
Do you think there's any kind of like an onus on Hamas as well, though? Because like I've heard that Hamas are kind of the other extreme, and I mean the Palestinian extreme. Do you think it'd be better if there wasn't a violent campaign against Israel? It was pure peaceful methods, like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you have to go back to them. I mean, the Palestinians are being occupied. They're being dispossessed. They have a right to resist. I mean, as we had, say, I mean, I know we're commemorating 1916, and you know, over the centuries, we've had forms of armed resistance here. No, I mean, not very successful. You know what I mean, in a sense. Until maybe to say the War of Independence to a certain extent, but at the same time, people have a right to resist. So Palestinians have a right to resist, whether it's Hamas, Fatah, whoever. But I mean, in terms of the balance of power, whether you know resistance is futile because you have such a powerful army and you've got such a brutal. I mean, who've no problem kind of taking it out on civilians, but. Hamas have actually, I mean, you know, see, this is one of the problems with the media. I mean, Hamas have said that they would sign up to, I've said, but I mean, I think it's too late, but I mean, they've said they would sign up to a two-state solution, you know what I mean, they would sign a peace accords with Israel. But I mean, but the violence you see from Gaza is that a lot of it is because of the what's happening in the West Bank. And there was a unity government proposed in June 2014, and I think this is one of the reasons Israel attacked Gaza, because to really stop that from actually happening, because what Israel fears is that that you have a united Palestinian front, and it suits them to have them divided.
Okay, sorry, that's what I want to say.
I think that's it. But I mean, people just that people should make themselves aware.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and you don't need to take what I say, for granted. But just have a look at, say, reports like from the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN report, say the UN report in Gaza. Gaza will be unlivable by 2020. A UN report 2012. You have Oxfam reports. You have you have a whole range of reports on like, say, the attack on Castle Ed. There's reports on what happened in Gaza 2014. You can have a look at the maps in Bethlehem, for example, about what's happening in the occupied territories and the amount of space that's been left for Palestinians. And this is Israeli policy. So, if you want to kind of take a stand on it, just make yourself aware. I think really, and go there if you can. There will be a trip organised by a member of the IPSC that'll be going probably in November. If you're interested, it'll be on our website. But there are other trips that go. You can go and help with the olive harvest. You can go and that's later on in the year. You can go planting olive trees in spring. There are kind of student exchanges in the summer. I mean, like you get here, people going, you stay in kind of universities and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways you can go to. It's worth going to see it for yourself, because I don't think it prepares you, even though you think you know a lot. But to see in an actual, I mean, to see the wall running through East Jerusalem, and see the wall running down a main street or a Palestinian street in Jerusalem, where you've got the shops on one side, and you've got like all the Palestinian customers on the other side, and you've got this totally dilapidated area, deliberately created. You know what I mean? And with just that cruelty and that racist attitude that the Israeli state has to Palestinians. But that's.
There's a shop up in Belfast now as well, isn't there?
There is, well, I don't know about.
It sells Palestinian products. It was sold by Jake Maxikis and other Irish speakers.
Yeah, and I know they sell Palestinian products in the Cultural
I think it's next door
on the
to
Falls Road.
Cultural.
On the Falls Road. There is a Palestinian information centre in Cork now as well. And we're here in Dublin in Capel Street. If anyone wants information or anyone wants any links, if you want to find out about going to Palestine as well, we can give you information on that.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for
Darren, thanks for that, and David.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Thanks.